Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. And as always, I have found an amazing guest for our show today. I'm super excited to be able to interview Chris Miles of Money Ripples. And Chris and I kind of go way back. We probably about 10 years. I think I probably met you about 9 or 10 years ago, something like that. Hired you
Yeah.
as a coach because at the time we were really struggling financially. And I learned a ton from you. And I'm so grateful that we had that connection back then. And it helped me to get to where I am now. Just super excited to have had an opportunity to reconnect and get you on the show here. And so I'm going to introduce you, give everybody a little bit of a bio for you. And then we're just going to jump in and see what we can learn today. So thank you for being here, Chris.
Absolutely. Such an honor.
All right. Well, Chris Miles, he calls himself the cash flow expert. And he's also an anti-financial advisor, which I think after we do this bio, I'm going to have you explain what that is. A leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them today. Chris is an author, a podcast host of the Money Ripples podcast, has been featured in US News, CNN Money, Entrepreneurs on Fire, Bigger Pockets, and has a proven reputation with his company Money Ripples, getting his clients fast financial results. In fact, his personal clients have increased their cash flow by over 300 million in the last 13 years. So that is an amazing statistic. So Chris, thank you for joining us today, and tell us a little bit about what you mean by anti-financial advisor.
Yeah. Anti-financial advisors, because a lot of people say, oh, you teach about money, you're a financial advisor. Absolutely not, because financial advisors teach you the same old stuff of, spend nothing, save everything in scarcity, right? Save it forever. And hopefully someday you'll have something. And that's not what I teach at all. I teach about really like what it says right there, right? Live your life now, not tomorrow. How do you actually have that dream life today? In fact, I even got the shirt to match it.
I love it.
Live your life now, right? And it doesn't mean, of course, like eat, drink, and be merry. I'm not talking about that, of course. It's more about how do you actually have that life that you've always dreamed of right now. It's interesting because I wasn't always an expert with money, right? Definitely not. In fact, when I was raised, I was pretty much typical middle class family, that I was raised in. I mean, somewhat typical. I mean, kind of typical in the 80s, especially because parents divorced, had two different parents. I learned from my mom. She was very much the artist. She was the oil painter. In fact, she was trained by the same master painter that trained Bob Ross, if you know who he is, painting the happy little trees and stuff, right?
Wow, cool.
So she taught me to kind of follow your passions and to serve, right? And those kind of things and just live a mission. With my dad, I learned more about, your word is your bond, right? And that really pretty much you got to just do what you say you're going to do, and just take life by the reins and go with it. But the one thing they both had in common is they did not really have an abundance of money. In fact, the conversations were always the opposite. It was always about, hey, we can't afford this. What do you think I am, made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees. The worst one with my dad would say, I'm going to die working. Like that was the one that really got to me, because I said, I don't want to follow that path. And like every teenager, you want to do something different. So when I went to college, eventually I moved to Utah. And while I was here, I remember thinking, okay, if I want to become a business consultant, that was my path I was going to take. I should have real life business experience. I shouldn't just have an MBA and PhDs or things like that. So I dropped out of college and I said, all right, I'm going to find some business to do. I don't know what business that is, but I'm going to find something. Well, the first one that came along was actually become a financial advisor, not realizing that anybody can become a financial advisor if you can pass a test with 70% and not have a criminal record.
Wow.
So so I ended up going in that business, right? And I actually ended up enjoying it. I really love teaching. That's like my real passion is teaching, right? And I love doing that. And it was kind of cool to learn about money. But after a few years, my dad said, you know what? I want you to advise me. When are you going to help me? And it was a really intimidating meeting to do that because, I mean, I met with people that had a lot of money from time to time, but this one was nerve-wracking because this is the guy that changed my diapers, right? So I'm sitting down with him. He says, all right, Chris, I'm 61 years old. I want to retire. Y2K was not my friend. It actually hurt my 401k, but it's coming back. What can I do? And I look at his money and everything. I mean, this guy packed money in his 401ks like every good boy and little girl should do. He paid off his house early in 18 years. He was so proud of that. And so he was completely debt free, did everything that you're supposed to do. And in fact, he probably did everything so well that I think Dave Ramsey actually followed my dad's example. He's like, oh, I want to be like him when I grow up, because my dad's almost 80. So anyways, I look at his finances. I say, Dad, I'm going to level with you. If you try to retire today, you better hope you die in 5 years, because that's how much money you have left. After toiling and slaving away your entire life, that's what you have to live on. Okay, Chris, that's not what I wanted to hear. What do I do? And I said, I don't know. You did everything right. And you did everything that a financial advisor would teach. And even if I could try to do something, I can't guarantee I'm going to do anything better than what you're already doing. And that bugged me. It bugged me a lot because remember, he was kind of hearing him say he's going to work until he died. Part of my inspiration becoming a financial advisor was to say, I want to give him some of his life back. But to see that and to be that just in that moment, I realized this is a problem. And it became more apparent because I had a friend who pointed out, he was a real estate investor. And he said, Chris, how many of your clients are truly financially free where they don't worry about money? They don't worry about running out? I said, oh, well, if we put that on, that little extra comment on there, that would be none, because even the retired ones still worry about running out of money. Okay, how about this, Chris? How many of you guys as financial advisors can actually retire, not off the commissions that you're earning, but actually off of these mutual fund investments? And I thought about it. I remember thinking there's over 100 guys in my office. Some of them have been working there since the late 1970s, yet none of them can retire. So I said, none. And he said, there's your problem. And that kind of led me down a journey and a path. And I started looking outside of the Wall Street answers that really weren't giving me any answers, and started looking more into the Main Street, more like into real estate investing and things like that. And the next thing I know, as I start to do that, I realize I have an integrity crisis. I can either follow the path I was on, keep doing my career as a financial advisor, keep making money, and just kind of put blinders on and say, well, at least I'm helping somebody a little bit. Or I could take the other path, keep my integrity intact, and say, you know what? I can't teach this stuff anymore because I know it doesn't work. So I chose the latter. I left. I was a mortgage broker for a while. I even taught ballroom dancing at the local university for some time. And I was doing that for a while. In the meantime, also learning about real estate investing and cash flow and things like that I teach about today, to the point where later that year in 2006, I was able to become financially independent, 28, almost 29 years old, and wondering what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And that's where later on, going into 2007, eventually, mainly because people kept asking me, how'd you do it? I came out of that to start coaching people as well. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, like I've written some things down and we could just talk for hours on just what you shared. I want to pull out a couple of points of some things that you've shared, and then we'll dive deep into some of these others. First of all, I 100% agree with you with saving now and trying to enjoy your money later. I mean, to me, that does not make sense whatsoever. In fact, for one thing, you don't know if you're going to be around later. You don't know we don't know how many years we have on this earth. And so I think it is important for us to really enjoy life while we can. I quit calling my budget, my quote budget, I quit calling it that. And I started calling it my wealth counting. And awesome. It totally changed the emphasis. And I'm actually counting my wealth. I'm counting my income versus looking at my expenses all the time and how short I am and how I have to cut back and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to give that little tip to our listeners that sometimes even just changing the language will change your mindset. And I'm all about that, making sure that we utilize the resources that we have today to build more, and right. I love that. The other thing that I wanted to bring out was those two things that your parents gave you. Your mom, follow your passion, and your dad, your word is your bond. And I feel like putting those two together, even though they were, the middle-class mindset and, maybe didn't have it all together, I feel like those two things, when I was working with you, I feel like those really are the two key elements that you bring together for your clients. You teach them to follow their passion and also, do it the right way. Like do it honestly, do it forthrightly and uprightly so that you can feel proud, of the work that you're creating. And so I feel like you
Absolutely.
did really embody those two things that you got from your parents. And then also, I love what you're saying, because this podcast is Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. And we're always, finding that one moment where you got inspired. And you and I, when we were talking before, we kind of thought there was another moment, but I feel like this was actually the first moment, was when you were working as a financial advisor and hearing these questions of, are you financially independent? How many financial planners do you know that are financially independent? And could you retire today if you quit working? And you're like, you know what, this system's broken. And to be in integrity, you decided to go off the path and to really become an outlier and try to find a different solution, something that was outside. So now I totally understand what you're saying with anti-financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's go off the path and let's find. But the whole reason behind that was the integrity. It was you following something, you making sure that you were in integrity with what you were teaching. And I feel like that's a real key piece right there. And it doesn't sound like it was easy. It wasn't like, oh, here's the plan, I'm going to do this plan instead. You actually had to kind of go out, educate yourself. You taught ballroom dancing for a while. You kind of tried some different things, educated yourself before money ripples. So do you want to add anything else now that I've kind of spit that back at you?
Yeah, it's true. And life is a moment of different inspirations, right? There's always different turning points that you have. In fact, there's so many turning points in life, you start to wonder if you're just going in circles, right? But it's usually just a slight shift. That's all it takes, that slight movement that takes you on a totally different course. And you're right. I just thinking about it now. I mean, it did take me a good 2 months before I finally put in my resignation, almost 2.5 months, I think, before I finally resigned as a financial advisor. And it surprised them because, funny enough, I stopped attending their trainings for probably the last 3 months that I was there. So I stopped going to trainings, but my business was increasing. And it was increasing because I stopped trying to teach what they taught me. I was like, no more indoctrination, no more thinking that this is the path, this is the way, like the Mandalorian, right? No more of that. Like, this is actually going to be, let's teach it according to principle. And the funny thing is, as I started to do that, more clients started coming. So it was really ironic that my business was actually growing more while I was in this quandary. I couldn't keep selling the stuff that I knew I had been selling. I stopped, I dropped my securities license in 2005, for example. And eventually I was like wondering if I should drop everything by 2006. But yeah, it was a very interesting time because it took me a time to transition. But then once I made the leap, and it was kind of a weird time because I wasn't sure who I was. And I did have, I was a mortgage broker. I stayed on more to do that. And then I also, I was even doing stock coaching on the side. So teach people how to trade stocks and options. I was doing that as well. So I had plenty of money coming in. I didn't even need the income from the financial advising, but it did buy me that time and that ability to then figure out, all right, how do I figure out how to invest in real estate? How do I figure out how to create value in business that can actually generate more income? And there's a lot of things I kind of learned that were almost seemed accidental, but they end up being very inspired.
Wow, beautiful. The undercurrent of this that I'm hearing is you kind of testing the waters in different places to really find out who you are, what you want to represent, how you want to go out to the world in, following your passion, and also that your word is your bond, being in integrity with those things that you're teaching. I know that you have had some other situations in your life where some of those turning points kind of happened, where you had to really sit back and look at, who am I really? What do I really want to do? Do you want to just touch on one or two of those moments in life?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably 3 moments that follow that. And we can focus on whichever ones. But first moment was 2007 going into 2008 when the financial crisis started happening. I was financially independent, teach people how to become financially independent, only to find out that our business was tanking because we were focused on real estate investors, primarily the flippers who were losing money left and right. So we felt it first, right? Because now all of a sudden they couldn't pay us. And we just launched a brand new business, lots of expenses. And that whole time, like I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire. I was like, what do I do? Again, my integrity's in jeopardy at this point because I'm teaching people how to get out of the rat race, but now I'm back in. I tell people all the time, like I'm a horrible poker player. I just can't lie or BS very well. So instead of teaching people how to get out of the rat race, I actually taught them how to get resourceful, how to find money, kind of like the things I taught you, right? Mm-hmm. That all came because I was suffering. My pain eventually became everybody else's gain because I had to figure out how to dig out of $1 million plus debt hole and do it with no money and no credit. And that was a long battle. So I was back in the rat race again, so to speak, as Kiyosaki would say in Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I didn't get back out till 2016, So I had that moment that was a big, like really hard, feel like that imposter syndrome, right? There's a big moment in 2012. I went out on my own and launched Money Ripples, and I had to figure out who I was by myself, kind of like you and I were talking about before we went on the air, right? And then, of course, my divorce was like the last really big turning point for me that got me to really shape the way my business is today and what I'm teaching, and actually help accelerate my progress towards getting out of the rat race again for the second time.
Wow. So it sounds like what you're saying is that the shakeup, when there's kind of some, you could even call it like trauma or some problems happening in your life, that is the time where you really dug deep and got resourceful, and at the same time making sure that whatever you're doing, it's like checking in constantly. Is this in integrity with who I am? Is this integrity with who I want to be and what I want to represent? I feel like I want to maybe dive in a little bit to that moment where, with the financial crisis, where your clients weren't paying you anymore and you were $1 million in debt and just having to get resourceful. I know me personally, I've been in situations like that where I've shifted. In fact, right now, I'm just starting to feel like I'm getting my feet under me because I rebranded and started, not only this new podcast, but kind of a new message, created some new courses for people. And it's very much in alignment. And I'm the same way. You've known me for a long time, and I always want to be in integrity with what I'm teaching. And everything that I've done has felt right in the moment. But then when it doesn't feel exactly perfect anymore, I've got to, I can't be happy just like, well, we'll just keep on doing the same old thing, because it's working or whatever. I have to follow that inspiration to do what I know is right. And as a result of that, a lot of times there's months, sometimes, when there's no cash flow coming in. And so, that digging deep, getting resourceful, I think anybody that, those who are listening are typically entrepreneurial minded and probably are risk takers, goal setters, and they're constantly wanting to grow and achieve. And so this is probably something that they experience. So can you just share maybe some advice or tips or just any learnings that you've had from your experience?
Yeah. What's fascinating is it took me losing everything to find out I had everything.
Cool.
If that makes sense. For example, so as I was going the whole more and more, like I had money, I had resources, I had investments. But of course, as we started going 2007, 2008, 2007 especially, like that's when I first discovered I was in the hole about 15,000, 16,000 a month. So I was eating away any savings I had. I was running up credit cards.
I just got to interrupt you. You're making me feel really good, Chris. Because I'm like, okay, I'm not quite there yet. So
no, I mean that's where it's funny because in the financial world, you get a lot of these financial guys. They're always like super judgmental, right? They're always like talking down to you like you're an idiot, and they're always like telling you like you should do this, you should do that, and they shame you to try to get you to do their way. But the truth is, almost everybody I've talked to and met with clients, and that's been hundreds and hundreds, right? Nobody's been worse off than I was. So I can't come from a place of judgment in that sense because I've been way worse. And maybe for me, that was inspired, right? Maybe that was something that was meant to be. That's the thing, is like, I don't believe there are any accidents. I think everything happens for you for a reason. It depends on how you come out of that. It really makes a difference. And for me, that was kind of what gave me hope, because I was sinking fast. I got to the point where even I remember 2009, eventually I foreclosed on my house. I was trying to sell it, and the bank would not accept any sales prices. So we couldn't short sell the house. So instead, they thought, oh, we'll just let it go to the courthouse and sell off for about 200,000 less than the offers we already had on the house. So the guy came knock on the door. I remember it was a Wednesday morning, 10 a.m., nice, bright, sunny spring day. Knocks on the door. I recognize the guy, and he just said, "Hey, half hour ago, I bought your house at the courthouse. When can you get out?" And I said, we're about to have a baby next week. Can we put a pause on this maybe? He's like, I already bought this in cash. It's mine. I actually bought it for my sister. I said, well, can I pay you $2,000 to stay for 2 more weeks? And I got together every last penny I had to go and pay him. And I didn't even have money for a down payment for the next apartment we had to go to at that point. Had to scramble for money for that eventually, just buy us enough time to have a baby and then move out while my wife had postpartum. I mean, it was a rough time. And the thing that got me through was just understanding that everything happens for a reason, right? There's got to be a purpose behind it or something you can get out of it. And so I knew that I kind of looked at my future self. I kind of was like projecting myself in the future, then looking back on my moment that I was in at that time, just kind of leaving that time period to go into my future and look back and thinking, you know what, if this experience I'm going through even just blesses one person's life, would that be worth it? And I thought, yeah, it should be. And I also know too, like with if you ever read the book Think and Grow Rich, right?
Yes.
If you ever read that Napoleon Hill book, he talks about with every adversity is a seed for equal or greater opportunity. So I thought it was kind of like Rocky in Rocky 3. Remember when he's fighting Mr. T? And he get hit and he's like, that ain't so bad. That ain't so bad. It was kind of like that for me. I thought, man, if this is so bad right now, how much better is it going to be on the other side? If it's going to be equal or greater, man, it's going to be awesome. And it was hard because it was a good year and a half, almost 2 years of struggle. I mean, really, like not even know what to do. My wife at that time, she was threatening to move out with the kids, to move in with her sister, just till I figured my stuff out. I mean, it was horrible. I had family members saying, see, I told you should have finished getting that college degree and that bachelor's in sociology that's going to do something for you. You should have finished that. And you shouldn't be in business, all these kind of things, right? All the doubters and the haters came out. All the friends that I thought I had left because now I didn't have money. And so I wasn't as fun to be around anymore. I had to recontextualize everything. It was a dark time for me, of course, because I'd be up late at night. But for me trying to solve my own situation, it actually gave me the resources to be resourceful. It actually allowed me to help others be resourceful too. It's like, because people would come to me saying, Chris, I wish I could pay you, but I just don't have the money. I really don't. And I remember I had some basic information on their financial situation. I'd say, listen, and no, I wouldn't say this out loud. This is the part of going in the back of my head. I'm thinking their financial situation is way better than mine right now. All right. And so what I would say to them is, well, listen, if I can help you find the money, would you then pay me? And they were like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I said, great. And so I would show them like, here's how you get the money. Here's what you can do here. Here's how you get creative. Here's ways you can pay off your debt differently than the typical Dave Ramsey method. And this and that, ways to help free up and find cash flow. The thing I knew I was onto something really cool is when I was meeting with this woman. She was just out of college. And I told her, I said, listen, take your credit card and charge it up. And all the money you save from not using cash, but using your credit card instead, take that cash, pay off your car loan, and you'll free up $200 a month. She's like, wait a minute, are you seriously telling me to charge up my credit card to pay off my car loan that's a lower interest rate? Yes, I am. And she's like, okay. And I was like, it doesn't matter because the money you'll free up, you'll be able to pay off that credit card soon, and then you'll free up the money on the credit card as well. And then that's when I knew I was onto something. I'm like, wait a minute, this is creative. I'm getting outside the box because I had to be creative in my own situation. And what's ironic is you hear that $300 million over the 13 years, a lot of that money had nothing to do with passive income, which is where I'm focusing more today. Again, I didn't focus on passive income until I was actually creating and passive income and getting out of the rat race myself. That's when I went back to it around 2015 or so. But for really from 2008 until about 2015 or so, my entire focus was just on how to find money, not even investing it. My whole thing about investing was just don't lose it, invest in your business, right? But I was like, if we can free up the cash, that creates options, that creates more freedom. And that's what I was doing in my own situation. That's how I was able to dig out of $1 million plus debt hole, is I was just getting very creative, still finding ways to increase my income and create value in my business, always coming back to that. Like, how do I create value for people? How do I solve problems, serve people? That's what helped me get out of that situation faster. And ironically, that's also what I teach people to do now. So that's the kind of cool thing that happens, that everything happens for you and it happens for a reason. And it hasn't just blessed one person's life. It's blessed literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people's lives, probably into the hundreds of thousands, really. And I feel very fortunate and blessed that now looking back, that it's had a much bigger ripple effect, hence the name Money Ripples, right? Much bigger ripple effect than I ever planned on.
Wow, beautiful. What a great story. And I, just in case our listeners miss this, because I tend to grab onto these gold nuggets. And I just want to bring this back to the present for our listeners, that one of the key things that you did when you were in that situation was you projected yourself into the future. You saw in your vision, in your mind's eye, where you were after the fact, after the problem was solved, and then looking back, and the problem seems so much smaller in hindsight, doesn't it? It seems
Sure
like,
does.
is when you're going through it, it seems like such a huge, heavy burden. And it's like, wow, this is hard. But then when you get through it and you look back, it's like, I don't even remember what it felt like. I don't remember how hard it was. You know what I mean? I know I have been in a situation where we were $1,800 in the hole, not $15,000, $16,000 in the hole every month. We went through a period of time. That was actually when I met you. And the thing that I realized, it was a year and a half of that. We were doing some work, to try to get things figured out during that time. But one of the lessons that I learned, and this might sound really crazy, but I would get second notices in the mail, and I'd be like, okay, I need to pay that bill. We never got to the point where our credit was affected. We always, were able to keep bills paid so that our credit was always like 800 or above. We did really, really well during that time. But the lesson that I learned was nobody took me to jail for being $1,800 in the hole. That year and a half, we live in a country and we live in a time where if we dig ourselves into a money pit, we can literally dig ourselves out and come out on top. That was one of the huge lessons that I learned, to not stress so much. I wouldn't be where I am today, being able to take those risks and make changes and do things that feel in integrity with me, because I know a ton of people. I have been one of those people that stayed at a job because it was a steady income, or, that kept doing something because they were afraid that they wouldn't have enough money. And if you can let go of that and just know that when you get through it, and you will get through it, even if it's bankruptcy or whatever, it is that you have to go through during this problem, divorce in your case, that when you look back on it, the creativity that you learned, the resourcefulness that you learned, the ability that you learned to help other people to be creative and resourceful. I mean, that is gold. That is worth all of it.
Could I give you 2 book recommendations that helped me through that time?
Oh, yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. So one book that helped me a lot was a book by a few of my friends called 3 Feet from Gold by Greg Reed and Sharon Lechter.
Okay.
Great book.
I've heard
that's
of
like
it.
the Think and Grow Rich for the 21st century. 3 Feet from Gold.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. And they're true stories. So they're done in story format, like a character going through the story, but it's actually real people being interviewed. So like Truant Cathy, the owner of Chick-fil-A and things like that. And I remember reading a lot of times, one of the things that stood out to me in that book was so many people said, it only took me 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah. I love that.
And I don't want people to get stuck on the 10-year thing, because it doesn't have to be that way. But the concept was really cool. It was like, oh, okay, there's a period of growing and learning that happens and progression. And then all of a sudden, it seems like there's that huge curve. It's just like riding a bicycle. You start pedaling, right? And it's really hard to pedal. But then eventually, as you start to get faster and faster, that momentum carries you into the better, to where you exert less energy, but have a higher speed. And that's true in life and in business in general. So that was a great book for me. Another great book that helped about the same time was one of the more, I will say, quote unquote, humble books by a guy named, you might have heard of him, Donald Trump,
Yeah.
called Never Give Up. And it's funny because I call it more humble because he talks about his failures, right? He talks about the struggles that he had. One thing I took out of that book was especially that gratitude. He would say, even if there's 20 negative things, he would find one thing to hang on to that he could be grateful for. And that helped carry me through because remember, there was, a lot of my friends, there were still some good friends there, but a lot of people were gone. A lot of people lost faith in me, including people within my own walls of my own home. My own spouse lost faith in me, right? And I refused to go bankrupt. So I was being real stubborn that way. Finally, I remember hearing that. I thought, I need to change my attitude because I was starting to get a little embittered after some time, right? I was like, how long do I have to keep suffering? Like I've been praying, I've been doing everything that I could possibly do. I've been serving my neighbors. I've been trying to create as much what I call karmic debt, make karma my debtor. I was like, I've created so much good karma in the world. It's got to come back at some point. And I remember just thinking, I need to change my attitude. And so I got to a place of more surrender where I just said, you know what? It doesn't matter if it takes me 20 years, I'm going to get out of this. And I remember recontextualizing things like the collector calls, because I was getting calls multiple times a day from collectors all over the place. And I would avoid those calls, just like you were talking about avoiding the mail, right? I was avoiding those calls. I didn't want to answer them, tell them I have no money. Well, eventually I started picking up the phone and they'd say, hello, Mr. Miles. Is this Mr. Miles? Yes, it is. I'd like to collect the debt. Yeah, I know. Okay. Can you pay it? No. All right. When are you going to pay us? No clue. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to keep calling back, right? I hope so. And like, all right, bye, click. And I started calling them I love you calls. Because when I approach those calls, it's like, you know what? My friends don't call anymore, but these guys call me faithfully. These are like my friends calling me up. And so I would call them I love you calls. And so whenever they came in, it's like, hi, nope, I don't have any money yet, but I'll pay you back someday. Just don't know when. Okay, click. And that would go on for a few years. Eventually, what's funny is that it was after that point of surrender and just recontextualizing everything, about a month or two later, that's when my income started to boost up. It started to increase dramatically. And things started to really turn around. And I was able to start digging myself out of that hole. In fact, I paid like $900,000 of that debt within about a 3.5-year period of time.
That's amazing.
And that was a big turning point for me.
That's huge. That is so awesome. I love that, just changing the energy. And I 100% agree. I mean, those people who have followed me in the past, that gratitude is a really big part of what I do. And I really feel like that's the highest vibration that we can be in. One thing that I've noticed is that if I owe somebody money, if I even reach out to them and just say, hey, I'm really short on cash right now. I don't know when I'm going to be able to pay you, but I just want you to know that I'm good for it. I mean, it really just helps you to feel in integrity. And so you're not like hiding, and because that's not the kind of energy that is going to bring more money to you. So that's amazing. 900,000 in 3.5 years. That's really cool. One of the things that you shared with me, and I'm kind of, feeling this with all these stories that you've told, is that we progress in stages. I remember you saying that we progress in stages and that there are periods of uncertainty at every level. And you mentioned that even when you believe that you're working in your power and you're living in your power, that there are even still more ways that you can refine it. Do you want to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so even when I launched my company, Money Ripples, and I was working in my genius and everything, right, and doing the very thing that I've done for years, it was interesting where I went through a divorce in 2015, and it was a hard divorce. In fact, I remember going to your house, in fact, like right in the middle of it, and I was just lost, because especially when you wrap up your identity saying I'm a husband and a father, and then all of a sudden that's ripped away, and you're like, wow, now I'm living alone, and I don't see my kids every day like I used to, especially where I'm a guy that's worked from home for more than a decade, so to have that ripped away was probably one of my emotionally worst times ever. I mean, the financial hardship was tough, right? But the emotional toll of that divorce, and that breaking down of everything that was happening was horrible on me. It was so hard. It got so bad to the point where I didn't want to answer emails anymore. I was letting the emails build up against me. And probably for a good 4 months, I would say that I was in this hard time. Now, and in fact, it was so hard. I mean, it was interesting because it even created a financial hardship too as a result, because I went from I had this great momentum in that year, having a record breaking year. And all of a sudden, for the next, I believe it was the next 3 months, I made a total of $6,500. That was it. Where I was used to making over 10,000 a month, I now was making like 2,000 a month, and I was trying to help pay for 2 homes because, my ex-wife, she hadn't had a job. She was taking care of a bunch of kids. So, I'm trying to pay for that. And she's like, you must be hiding money. I said, no, I went from working 50 or 60 hours a week down to like 5 hours a week. Because even though I had time, and even people say, new clients would say, oh, well, do you have time working with me? I'm like, oh, I got plenty of time. But emotionally, I didn't have the capacity. And so I was blocking and pushing away business because I was emotionally full, right? So I was giving that message out there that I was full. Mm. Long story short, it got me to question everything. Like, is this the business I should be in? Does anybody even really care that even if I quit this business, would anybody even notice? Like, I was just going through this horrible time, and I was like, maybe I should just quit everything, just throw it all, burn it to the ground, And then I started learning about a system called human design, that really kind of shifted. It got me to understand that my intuition, right, following my gut, going with that, especially with my specific design, that's what leads right. It leads correctly. And when I look back through my life, I said, oh, that's true. Like, my intuition has actually been my number one guide, following my heart, right? Following my intuition. And as I did that, I noticed that I made better decisions. And so I started slowly working my way back. I remember I started checking emails. I started to do it because I remember there was one person that said they had prepaid me money to make a video course for their students. And so they said, I'll give you $500 now, $1,000 later when it's done. And they gave me the $500 down payment, but I hadn't got it done yet. And they said, all right, you have a deadline. I think it was like December 10th. It needs to be done. Or you're going to pay me back my money. I'm like, I don't have the money to pay you back, so I better get it done. And so I started going through that grueling process, trying to get out of that muck, right? It was like, because I was going from a period of almost inaction to a period of action. I had to get that flywheel going again, start pedaling that bicycle in that first gear, right? Get it going again. And eventually I did. I started checking off the emails, started replying back to people. And that momentum and that activity started to get things moving. And then as I started to really focus on who am I at the core, and then more importantly in my business, who do I really want to work with? And I started cutting out all the activities. I got rid of all the fluff. I stopped attending all these networking events I was going to. I was probably spending 10 hours, 15 hours a week alone just attending networking events every week. And I'm like, well, how does that really work for my business? And there was a great book, another book recommendation is called The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz. In The Pumpkin Plan, he talks about those prize-winning huge pumpkins you hear about in the news, how they grow those. And one, they get a seed from Nova Scotia. Sometimes it costs up to $100,000 to buy those seeds. You plant them hoping that it actually grows a pumpkin, because it may not. And then after you plant them, as the pumpkins start growing, they shoot off little pumpkins. You start cutting off the smallest pumpkins first, so that eventually one vine feeds one big pumpkin, right? So all the nutrients is going that one big pumpkin. So I started doing that in my business as well with all my activities. Like, what was actually, what's that Pareto's principle? What's the best 20% that produces 80% in your business, right? And then I even thought, what if I took the Pareto's principle one level further? What I call Pareto the crap out of the Pareto's principle, which is, what's the top 20% of the top 20%, which is your top 4%. What's the top 4% that produces 96% of your results? And so I actually started like imaging, like, who are my best clients? Like, who are they? And when I would do a podcast, I would envision them and talk to them on the podcast. I would just focus my mental image on those people. I wouldn't focus on people that were like the whiners and the complainers. Don't worry, you were not one of those people. You're on the good side, right? But there were some people I had that were just soul sucking and draining. Just because they wanted to hire me doesn't mean I should have let them hire me, right? And so I started to really shift everything. And I remember the first event I did was January that next year, and there were 4 people there, 2 couples and 1 helper. It was the smallest event I ever put on. But I remember I was about an hour into the event, and I stopped the event and I turned around from the whiteboard I was writing on. I said, listen, can I just level with you guys? Here's the thing. Both of you, you're perfect to work with me. Like, you are exactly the people that I want in the seats right now. You know it. I know it. So can we just assume that you guys are going to pretty much be working with me, and let's just spend the whole weekend for me creating value and helping serve you guys. Is that cool? They're like, yeah. And both those couples became clients. I actually made more money at that event than events where I had 50 people. I made more money and more profit because I wasn't like trying to impress and try to put on at the best hotel. It was a nice hotel, but it was a smaller room. It wasn't like the bigger rooms I had packed before. It was just the right people being at the right there. And everything started shifting in my business because of that Pareto's principle, right? But just really focusing on what's really true to me, who am I, and how do I want to serve people, and who do I want to serve? And just getting that point, that point of trauma, like you mentioned earlier, right? Getting myself to really question where I am and who I am, it's made all the difference. And that really my business model, it's crazy because I lost my virtual assistant because we didn't have all the activities anymore. She was working 4 hours a week. So she said, hey, Chris, I'm just going to go start my travel agency business. So she went and started her own business. I didn't have a VA anymore. I was all alone. And the crazy thing is, even by, 2019, 2020, I broke over $1 million, pretty much being self-employed, working part-time, right? I was working like 15, 20 hours a week, way less than I was before. And I was making over $1 million a year. And then I started, now I've started to add a team. There's a whole other progression and, non-crisis, but definitely evolution that's had to happen for me. But that's the crazy part, is that those kind of experiences can become a blessing in your future.
Beautiful. I just want to repeat back to you. I wrote down 4 steps that you used to get to this place. And the first one was intuition, really honoring your intuition, realizing that that was something that you're gifted at. It's something that's really important to you. And so you started honoring that. The second one was activity, get some activity going. And then the third one was to cut out the fluff, to focus on not just the 20%, but the 4% that was bringing in your 96% of your income, and use that to focus your mental energy on those particular clients. And then the fourth one, which I think the third one actually brought to you, because with you focused on just those 4% people, then the people who came to your event, you only had 2 couples at your event, but they were the 4%, right? Mm-hmm. And so 4 is just having the right people in your presence, so you can be honest, you can be forthright, you can level with them, and you can just like speak from the heart and know that you're going to get each other.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. I have one last question for you, and I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it while I share with everybody how to get in touch with you, because I know that everybody's going to want to listen to your podcast. Everybody's going to want to reach out and find out how you can maybe serve them if they're your 4%. So the question that I have for you is, what advice, like one nugget of advice that you could give to people who are in a situation where they feel like they're scraping the bottom, and like you mentioned, your capacity for growth or for the heights, that you can experience is equal to the bottom. So what would be your one piece of advice for somebody that needs to like springboard up to that highest level? So while you're thinking about that, I'm going to just share with people how to get in touch with you. Chris makes it really easy to get in touch with him. All of his social media handles are Money Ripples. So just Facebook is at Money Ripples, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of those are at Money Ripples. And then he has his Money Ripples podcast, which is on YouTube, iTunes, or all the other popular podcast platforms. So you can find him there. And then also he's given 2 ways to contact him. One is email, info@moneyripples.com. And the other one is his website, www.moneyripples.com. And when you go to that website, up on the top menu, because I went there and I did this today, he has a free passive income calculator. So you can kind of get a number of, I'm not even sure exactly what that number represents. It also comes with an invitation to have a conversation with him about that number. So I would highly recommend that you do that. I have that number for me, and I'm excited to reach out to Chris and see what does that number mean, and what, how can he maybe serve me to help that number get bigger. I'll put all of that information in the description, and I think I'm going to put those book recommendations in the description as well. Chris. So maybe if you could just send me an email real quick after we're done and give me those titles again with the authors. I'll put that in the description as well. And yeah, so thank you so much for all of the wonderful advice and tips and just stories that you've shared with us today. So before we end, I do want to just ask that last question. What advice would you give to someone who feels like they're kind of at their bottom and they're really needing to springboard up to the top?
Yeah, I'm going to probably give you advice that will surprise you.
Okay.
There is no bottom. Yeah,
Okay.
it can always be worse.
True.
And I think that's divine that way. If you feel like you're at your bottom, and I get it, because if it's like a new low, just understand that in those new lows, that's where you create the best resources to create new highs as well. That's usually where you find those new skills, right, that you can develop during that period of time. But just know, I mean, I remember saying in 2007, well, it can't get any worse than this, right? And then 2008, it can't get any worse than this. 2009, okay, can it get any worse than this? Like I'm afraid to even ask anymore. And that's where I kind of, again, get that point of surrender and saying, you know what, it could always be worse. And then you switch into a place of gratitude, right? Because you realize it could always be worse, and maybe it will get worse, but at least I know that it can always also get better. And I think that's really important to remember, is that there's always hope. And even if it feels hopeless, even if it feels dark, just remember that this is happening for you, and it's happening for a reason. Make the best of it.
I love that. At first, when you said that, I'm like, no, that's not very good advice. that sounds negative. But really what that feels like is giving it up, like giving it up to God, giving up to your inspiration and to your creativity, your own creativity, and allowing yourself to believe that no matter where you are, whether you are at the highest level that you've ever been, or if you're at the lowest level you've ever been, there are new levels of growth, that there are new levels of refinement, and we can be creative. And kind of something that I've learned from you today too, is that we don't have to wait for those problem times. We don't have to wait for those traumatic moments to get creative. That if we can get creative now, this could be our bottom. Like today, where we are right now, could be our bottom, and we could rise even higher. Thank you so much for being here. This has been really, really awesome. I know you're going to have lots of new people joining you on your podcast and reaching out to you on your website, because you just provide so much value. Super grateful to have you as a friend and also as a mentor. And I love you, Chris. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And thanks to all of our listeners for being here. And we look forward to having you back again for another amazing guest on Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. And until then, I hope you will take some of this advice that you've received today and get inspired and live in your power.